Jimmy played baseball all afternoon, and he didn't feel like walking home, so he decided to thumb a ride. He'd done it 100 times before, and he didn't think anything was unusual when the driver struck up a friendly conversation. In fact, he seemed like a real nice guy. Then during lunch, Ralph showed him some pornographic pictures. Jimmy knew he shouldn't be interested, but, well, he was curious. What Jimmy didn't know was that Ralph was sick, a sickness that was not visible like smallpox, but no less dangerous and contagious, a sickness of the mind. You see, Ralph was a homosexual, a person who demands an intimate relationship with members of their own sex. But all homosexuals are not passive. Some resort to violence, as in the case of Mike Merrick. In the heat of competition, no one noticed the man who sat and watched. And when the game broke up and the others left, Mike decided to stay and practice a little longer. When they finished, the stranger told him he'd make a fine player someday if he got lots of practice. The companionship, the praise, the friendly attitude dispelled any misgivings Mike might have had about going with a stranger. He probably never realized until too late that he was riding in the shadow of death. But sometime that evening, Mike Merrick traded his life for a newspaper headline. Public restrooms can often be a hangout for the homosexual. Bobby and his friends hadn't noticed the man who had been in the restroom when they changed, and as it was late, he suggested they take the shortcut under the pier, but the others preferred to take the more traveled way home. Bobby recognized the stranger as the man in the restroom. The shortcut under the pier didn't seem like a good idea at all. After all, it's more fun to stay with your friends anyway. Bobby had made a wise decision. It may have saved his life. The decision is always yours, and your whole future may depend on making the right one. So no matter where you meet a stranger, be careful if they are too friendly, if they try to win your confidence too quickly, and if they become overly personal. One never knows when the homosexual is about. He may appear normal, and it may be too late when you discover he is mentally ill. So keep with your group, and don't go off alone with strangers unless you have the permission of your parent or teacher.
My name is Craig Bettendorf, and the guy to my left is Kai Morgan, my partner in production and in life. We, along with a team of extremely talented individuals, have created a television series called Treading Yesterday that is now in development. As filmmakers and as members of the LGBTQ community, we take presenting our stories to the broader audience seriously. Our stories have meaning, our stories have value, and our stories help to shape public opinion. These stories are spoken in our words and heard in our voices. It hasn't always been that way.
Hello there. I'm George Putnam. I'd like to begin with a fact, a simple yet shocking fact. It is this. A flood tide of filth is engulfing our country in the form of newsstand obscenity and is threatening to pervert an entire generation of our American children. We know that once a person is perverted, it is practically impossible for that person to adjust to normal attitudes in regard to sex. Through this material, today's youth can be stimulated to sexual activity for which he has no legitimate outlet. He is even enticed to enter the world of homosexuals, lesbians, sadists, masochists, and other sex deviants. The psychiatric terms for these unnatural sex acts are unknown to most decent adults in our country. But through this salacious material, these abnormalities are corrupting the minds and the hearts of our children.
It's pretty clear that from an early age, society has conditioned its citizens to be fearful of homosexuals. This form of social conditioning is known as institutionalized homophobia. Institutionalized homophobia has shaped the general public's opinion about gays and lesbians.
And then we come to a terribly sad indictment of our society, the so-called physique group of publications. These magazines with a homosexual viewpoint and poses are often not understood by many youngsters who take them as instruction of body development. But psychiatrists believe that prolonged exposure of even the normal male adult to this type of publication, though he may not be aware of its true nature, will nevertheless pervert. Think then of the consequences to the inexperienced youth who, in purchasing and studying this material, becomes a pawn for these misfits, these homosexuals, who have a slogan that betrays the evil of the breed. Today's conquest, they say, is tomorrow's competition.
It was in this era that Florida Legislative Investigation Committee, fresh off its dismal performance of rooting out communists from the state, decided to turn its sights on homosexuals. This is the cover of the committee's official special report. The committee's special report opens by stating that homosexuality is, and far too long has been, a skeleton in the closet of society, and that the best current estimate of active homosexuals in Florida is 60,000 individuals. The report continues by stating, "The plain fact of the matter is that a great many homosexuals have an insatiable appetite for sexual activities and find special gratification in the recruitment to their ranks of youth, and that the homosexual's goal is to bring over the young person, to hook him for homosexuality." The committee began by searching Florida schools. The result was an assault on individual rights, intellectual tolerance, and academic freedom. The committee's investigators interrogated hundreds of students, teachers, and administrators, often in semi-secret off-campus locations, instilling a climate of fear and intimidation within the state university system, causing the firing of 39 professors and deans for suspected homosexuality, and the revoking of licenses of 71 public school teachers. The old myths that fueled the Florida Legislative Investigation Committee would later resurface in Anita Bryant's Save Our Children campaign, conjuring up images of predatory school teachers and manipulating public opinion in a successful referendum to turn back anti-discrimination legislation in Florida and igniting similar actions across the nation.
Rolling.
Training yesterday, episode 5, scene 6, take 4.
Okay, and action.
We decided to sit down with 3 of our series cast members to discuss the impact of homophobia in their lives and in our culture. Meet Jax, Sean, and Steve. While Jax and Sean are millennials, Steve is a baby boomer. All share distinctly different insights from their collective experience.
You have to be a sex symbol to wear a hat. That's when they tell you, please put your clothes back on. Oh, okay.
Ugh, I get told that all the time.
No, I doubt it.
Could you please just get dressed and go?
So recently, the citizens of Taiwan went to the voting booths to vote on marriage equality in their country. Taiwan has been among the most liberal Asian countries, and it was pretty heavily assumed that the vote would be in favor of marriage equality. And what surprised most people, the vote did not support marriage equality, and Taiwan's same-sex couples cannot legally wed. Now, I bring this up because there's actually a bit of a local connection to the story, and that is that the president of Grindr, the gay hookup app, spoke out against marriage equality during Taiwan's vote, and Grindr's currently owned by a Chinese company. So his expressions actually had some merit. He said that he believes that marriage should be between one man and one woman. What do you guys make of the president of a company that specifically sells a service and product to only the gay community, not supporting marriage equality?
Well, I mean, I remember hearing about this, and I deleted Grindr immediately, and then about 3 hours later I re-downloaded Grindr, because lonely. But I mean, in my eyes, like, obviously you can't agree with someone who thinks that, you know what I mean? Because it goes completely against the type of people that they're selling to. But at the same time, I'm not, like, going to not use the product because I just don't think that it's, you know, I don't think it necessarily super affects the community in general. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think Grindr is like a hub for the gay community, you know? And I don't even know who the CEO is, so...
Steve, you have a little bit different take?
Well, my take in when you posed the question, because it sounds very familiar to how, because Taiwan being a very liberal country, it kind of reminds me of when Prop 8 was going on here in California. That was a total surprise also, when that initiative passed, that barred, banned same-sex marriage. Now, I'm seeing that maybe with Taiwan's issue here, I mean, as far as the country of Taiwan, maybe this is just, you know, might be the first step. You know, you can't really stop progress.
It truly was a different time, because you could literally be arrested and put in jail in a number of the states across the United States for simply being gay and having a consensual sexual relationship with a member of the same sex.
I mean, I'm not surprised. Like, 0% surprised. But I mean, I wouldn't, like I said, I wouldn't be able to live the way that I do now at all.
I remember the first time I think I went into a full-fledged gay bar. I mean, to see two men kissing was quite a shock. You know, you're hearing Cyndi Lauper doing "Girls Just Want to Have Fun," and these guys are definitely having fun on the dance floor. But you know, that was but at that time, you know, they could destroy your careers because of it, because you could be put your name would be in the papers, you would be put in jail, you'd have to explain to your employer why you were put in jail, you know, and you could lose your job. So it was really quite devastating with the laws that were in place prior to what we have currently. That and you have to hand it to the pioneers of the gay rights movement to actually fight for these and to change people's minds.
You may be thinking that the video images we've shared and that the incidents we've discussed are from the past and are of a less enlightened, bygone era. Things surely have changed over the years. It's not like that anymore, right?
The homosexual agenda is destroying this nation. Okay? It's just a fact. Not everybody's lifestyle is equal, just like not all religions are equal. You know, the very fact that I'm talking to you like this here today puts me in jeopardy. Okay? And I'm not I'm not gay bashing, but according to God's word, that is not the right kind of lifestyle. It has deadly consequences for those people involved in it. They have more suicides. And they're more discouraged, there's more illness, their lifespans are shorter. You know, it's not a lifestyle that is good for this nation. Matter of fact, studies show that no society that has totally embraced homosexuality has lasted more than, you know, a few decades. So it's the death knell of this country. I honestly think it's the biggest threat, even that our nation has, even more so than terrorism or Islam, which I think is a big threat. Okay, because what's happening now? They're going after in schools 2-year-olds. You know why they're trying to get early childhood education? They want to get our young children into the government schools so they can indoctrinate them. I taught school for close to 20 years, and we're not teaching facts and knowledge anymore, folks. We're teaching indoctrination, okay? And they're going after our young children as young as 2 years of age to try to teach them that the homosexual lifestyle is an acceptable lifestyle. You know, gays are infiltrating city councils. Did you know Eureka Springs? Anybody been there to the Passion Play? Okay, have you heard that the city council of Eureka Springs is now controlled by gays? Okay, there are some others. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Tacoma, Maryland, Kensington, Maryland, in Vermont, Oregon, West Palm Beach, Florida, and a lot of other places in Florida. What's happening? And they are winning elections. One of the things I deal with in our legislature, I tried to introduce a bill last year that would notify parents. Schools had to let parents know what clubs their students were involved in. And the reason I did that bill primarily was this. We have the Gay Straight Alliance coming into our schools. Kids are getting involved in these groups. Their lives are being ruined. The parents don't know about it. So I introduced a bill that said you have to notify all clubs and things. And one of my colleagues said, you know, we don't have a gay problem in my community, so that's why I voted against that bill. Well, you know what? To me, that is so dumb. If you've got cancer or something in your little toe, do you say, well, you know, I'm just going to forget about it because the rest of me's fine? It spreads, okay? And this stuff is deadly, and it's spreading, and it will destroy our young people. It will destroy this nation.
As I reflected on the legislators' words and mulled over the fact that this wasn't a discussion from decades ago, but was a conversation that occurred during a recent election cycle, it occurred to me that she was citing talking points during her presentation to her constituency, talking points that supported the continuing maligning of LGBT people. These talking points seemed familiar, but why?
September 1935. The Nuremberg Laws. In the Reichstag, Hermann Goering spelled out the purpose of the Reich Citizenship Act and the Act for the Protection of German Blood and German Honor. Pure must not mix with impure. From now on, intermarriage was forbidden and sex declared illegal between pure Aryan and impure Jew. Appealing to feelings and beliefs deep-rooted in European Christian culture, Nazi propaganda pilloried the dirty Jew. Dishonest, scheming, money-lending capitalist and subversive communist. Verminous, unclean, racially inferior. Jews are not wanted here. But for leaders seeking to unite a people, they were mighty useful scapegoats to unite against. In schools, the Jew boys stood by the blackboard as their classmates pointed out the difference. German school children were taught to despise Jewish culture as soft and evil, to be proud of their own strength, their own purity.
It turns out that her talking points weren't all that contemporary after all. Each of the talking points referenced by the state legislator have been previously used by the Nazi Party to evoke fear and disgust towards Jews. These words were simply recycled for use today. Same playbook, different scapegoat.
The question has always been, why do people hate gay and lesbian people, and why do they want to hurt us? And for many years we had this, I think, mistaken idea that it was homophobia, fear of gay people. But when you actually review your own life and think about people who've been prejudiced against you, do you see fear on their faces? No. If you look at, throughout history, when people are cruel, there's a certain kind of fun that accompanies it, like those famous photos of white families picnicking underneath the lynched black man's body hanging
or the
in
pictures
Indiana.
from Guantanamo.
Right, or Abu Ghraib.
Abu Ghraib, yeah.
Yeah. So, I suddenly realized that homophobia is not a phobia at all, that it's like a pleasure system, that it's not fear, it's fun. People enjoy it because it makes them feel superior. And it starts early in the family. You can elevate yourself if you're straight and your sibling is gay, just like out in the world. You can think that you are better. And that's where it's coming from. It's something that's bringing people happiness.
And it gives the culture some kind of happiness to say, I'm not answering you, I'm not talking to you, I'm not publishing your books, I'm not listening to what you have to say.
Well, it helps them pretend that they're naturally superior and that their privileges are deserved, instead of facing the fact that it's socially constructed and completely artificial.
The February 1995 edition of Vanity Fair magazine sported a sexy cover of Brad Pitt with his shirt unbuttoned and his chest exposed. The cover also contained a story titled Lone Star Hate and followed a story that would later be called Murder in Texas. The story followed a period ending in April 1993, during which time 8 gay men had been hunted down, tortured, and murdered by gangs of adolescent males in the Lone Star State. Most troubling in this expose was the fact that some of the convicted killers received favorable sentences, as few as 3 years with good behavior, due to the widely held belief that they were in some way victims themselves. A judge who had presided over one of the cases was quoted as saying in the Dallas Times that these guys, the murdered gays, wouldn't have been killed if they hadn't been cruising the streets picking up teenage boys. And again, you may find momentary solace in the belief that 1993 was a long time ago, that things have changed and we've grown and become more educated in matters of sexuality. And then you have one of those days where all you want to do is just get home and throw yourself into a video game to escape reality and the problems of the world. Even though gays aren't being hunted down and murdered in the streets as they were in Texas in 1993, there is still clearly an appetite for this activity, real or virtual.
Hello?
Hello?
Attention, all queers. We've come to eliminate.
We've come to eliminate the gays.
Stand down, and we will spare the level 2.
Let's just go to the, what's it called?
We've come to eliminate all gays.
All gays. Yeah, are you gay, sir?
Stand
you better not be gay.
Hey,
You better not be gay, bro.
Oh
my God, it's gay.
Eliminate that queer. Queer down.
Queer down.
Hey, don't even try with your gay bullets. They won't work. Grab your shit.
We're anti-gay.
We have to decontaminate it. We got decontaminate the AIDS. Make sure you wear some Brad protections. What'd you say?
I'm calling bully hunters. Buddy?
Bully hunters? You're gonna have to call better than that. We're the gay eliminators. We're
what you
fucking queers.
Yeah, with your faggot ass, no clothes, you fucking queer.
Yeah,
What are you doing?
why are you walking around with no clothes,
yeah,
queer?
why are you walking around with no clothes, huh?
Queer?
Yeah, keep on walking, fag.
Keep on walking, beta male, fucking queer. We're we're cleansing the wasteland.
Yeah, of all these. I think the radiation got to your brain, buddy.
Of the queers, yeah. What's the one meme? Hold on. Gay people be like, gay people when they get in hell be like, guess I was wrong. Come here, bitch.
You know what they did to your people back then? We killed them, buddy.
Lynch, queers.
Look at him, he's like, oh my God, I've been chased, oh my God.
It's like, oh, these straight people are so strong.
The Vanity Fair story followed a period ending in April 1993, during which time 8 gay men had been hunted down, tortured, and murdered by gangs of adolescent males. Maybe we haven't come as far as we'd like to believe. The beliefs that fuel this hate, along with the attitudes and behaviors that follow, must change, as they're clearly still an ingrained part of our culture and society. Returning to the opening clips that we shared at the beginning of this film, we see that they were commissioned by a police department and by a school district in suburban Los Angeles. This genre of filmmaking was called social guidance film. Social guidance films attempted to guide children and adults to behave in an acceptable manner. After World War II, the genre grew more common as a source of instruction in elementary and high school classrooms throughout the United States from the late 1940s through the 1970s. 2 governmental agencies, the police department and the school district, commissioned this film's creation, confirming that the hand of the state was vested in perpetuating stereotypes. Homosexuals were clearly shown as pedophiles, predators, abductors, and murderers. Simply put, American towns, cities, schools, police departments, and other state institutions were blatantly homophobic during the period of time in which this film was made. These feelings and beliefs were then taught to children as early as grade school, setting up the stage for a continued cycle of homophobia. This certainly qualifies them as supporters of institutionalized homophobia.
It made headlines when an 18-year-old Rutgers freshman, Tyler Clemente, committed suicide by jumping off the George Washington Bridge after two students posted a video of him having sex with another man online. It made news when a pack of gang members was busted for attacks that included the sodomy and torture of two teens in the Bronx. It made news when the Republican candidate for governor in New York delivered a speech claiming that he thinks homosexuality is a perversion and gay pride parades disgusting, and also when Senator Jim DeMint of South Carolina reiterated that gay people and unwed mothers should be banned from teaching in public schools. It makes news. There's also a body count from Richard Kim in The Nation. In September alone, the body count includes Billy Lucas, a 15-year-old from Indiana who hanged himself after repeatedly being called a fag by his classmates, Asher Brown, a 13-year-old Texan who shot himself after his fellow students performed mock gay acts on him during gym class, and 13-year-old Seth Walsh from California who hanged himself from a tree in his backyard after being teased for years for being gay. It makes news, it makes headlines, but what will it take to make change?
Whether homophobia continues in this decade due to irrational fear or sadistic pleasure, it certainly continues today. Institutionalized homophobia has been extremely effective because it has been embraced by both state institutions as well as religious institutions. Both church and state clearly played a significant role in shaping the public's opinion and perception of what gays and lesbians were like and how they should be treated in society. On October 1st, 1986, the Congregation for the Doctrine of Faith of the Roman Catholic Church published a letter to its bishops on ministering to the homosexual. Its conclusion supported an older determination which was restated as, homosexuality is intrinsically disordered and incompatible with the Christian experience. This statement of doctrine was published 13 years after the American Psychological Association, the largest psychiatric organization in the world, made history by issuing a resolution stating that homosexuality was not a mental illness nor a sickness. Other religious bodies, which rarely agreed with the Roman Catholic Church, also took the opportunity for social and political gain to actively campaign against the acceptance of LGBT people.
The homosexual community has political power now, a place in the community. To a quite considerable extent, homosexual individuals have come out of the closet. And one doesn't talk on television just about homosexuals, but with them. Yet, not so fast, or so far. The Reverend Jerry Falwell, for instance, with an impressive and devoted television following, continues quite frequently to use the media to press his own strong convictions that homosexuality is Satan's diabolic attack upon the family, God's order in creation. And, as he writes, we would not be having the present moral crisis regarding the homosexual movement if men and women accepted their proper roles as designated by God. There are many who follow Reverend Falwell with high regard when he expresses these thoughts on the air. And so, on the open mind today, I thought we might just as counterpoint talk with one who disagrees, who identifies himself quite forthrightly with the thinking of the gay community, and whose credentials as a distinguished American historian and academic scholar make him so much more than an angry partisan. Martin Duberman, historian and playwright, is Distinguished Professor of History at Lehman College in the City University of New York. Thanks so much for joining me today, Professor Duberman.
Pleasure.
As an historian, I wanted to ask why you think at this particular point in our history, the moral majority's point of view about homosexuality is being pushed quite so strongly.
On May 10, 1987, during the height of the AIDS pandemic, the Reverend Jerry Falwell, president of the political action organization known as the Moral Majority, took the opportunity to deride gays by delivering a televised speech which included the following message: God is bringing an end to the sexual revolution through the AIDS pandemic. They are scared to walk near their own kind right now, and that what we have been unable to do with our preaching, a God who hates sin has stopped dead in its tracks by saying, do it and die.
I think whenever there's a thrust forward for social change, there's always inevitably a counter-reaction. This was no less true of the anti-slavery movement than it is of the feminist movement or the gay movement.
Do you think that the anti-gay community movement will suffer the same fate that the other movements have suffered in our past?
You mean whether or not in a relatively brief amount of time the gay community will be accepted, or gay people will be accepted?
That's a fair question, yes.
I think we've gone far enough at this point so that our existence at least can no longer be denied. A great many people have come out of the closet. What that existence will consist of, the texture of it, the quality of it, does depend on future developments which no one can foresee.
What kinds of developments? In the nation, economic developments, social developments? What is it that you mean? Others have said at this table, if we experience a recession again, a strong recession, a depression, there will be a movement backward on all levels, and perhaps the progress, if one wants to call it that the gay community has made, will be unmade. Is that the sort of movement you mean?
I think it's quite possible. That's why I wouldn't want to get into predicting. What will determine that, what worries me about the far right, as represented by Falwell, is that he's combined a number of issues and minority groups. I mean, a study, for example, has been done by Professor Ken Sherrill at Hunter. And Sherrill has shown that followers of Falwell, which I guess is best put as fundamentalist Christians, really score as deeply bigoted on a wide range of issues. It isn't simply that they're anti-gay. They're also anti-abortion, anti-error, anti-busing. They would not merely like us to stand still, but they would like us to go back.
Falwell's political organization, the Moral Majority, opposed governmentally funded research to find a cure for AIDS because the disease was a gay problem, as reported in both Christianity Today and U.S. News and World Report in 1985. Falwell promoted the idea that AIDS was not only God's judgment on gay men, but also that divine judgment extended to all of society. AIDS is a lethal judgment of God on America for endorsing this vulgar, perverted, and reprobate lifestyle.
We review the mid-1980s in our film, and in doing so, we include the political and religious pressure that was placed on the LGBT community by groups like the Moral Majority and other like-minded groups. What effect do you remember these groups having on the day-to-day lives of LGBT persons?
They made us orphans. We were orphans from our families. We were orphans from the political sort of realities of our lives. And most critically, we were orphans from God. They convinced us, they convinced the community that we didn't belong and that we were stepchildren to evil. And so their impact was vast.
So all in all, sodomy laws and a national conservative political climate work together to really marginalize sexual minorities. Groups like the Moral Majority went out of their way to influence the government at every level and to prevent what they called the gay agenda in favor of what they called family values. During this era, it meant for a lot of us that we really had to lead a more secretive life, that by night we were gay, and by day we did our best to just blend in to the day-to-day reality. And many of us, myself included, actually had 2 phone lines. And again, this is prior to cell phones. And the reason why you had 2 phone lines was because you wanted to have a phone line that your employer could reach you at, that if you had a spouse, a partner, a boyfriend, you didn't ever want that person to answer the phone, because if they did, the question might arise at work, why are you living with a guy? Or why is a guy answering your phone so early in the morning?
Well, it's, and believe me, when you hear the terms now at my age of moral majority, family values, and so on, it still sends a chill down my spine. There's still times that they will still, scream something that is so totally untrue. Fortunately now, as opposed to then, we have the power to fight back and set the record straight. No pun intended. But, so that's, so right now it's a heck of a lot better. The media is a lot better, more open to us compared to what we had, back when the moral majority was trying to exert their power.
In the mid-'80s, during the height of AIDS, they recommended to the government, which was a heavily Republican establishment at the time, that anyone testing positive for AIDS should be put in isolation.
Shut up. Wow.
There was a congressman in the state of California by the name of William Dannemeyer who actually proposed that to Congress, and Congress was seriously considering that.
Wow.
Well, it's again just like even just calling it the moral majority to just have people, because again, you kind of spoke to that about it's weird to think of you just having to live this hidden life because everybody's telling you that you're immoral just because of just how you feel. And I mean, I'm paranoid enough when my boss calls me just on its own, let alone worrying about who's going to pick up the phone and if I'm going to get fired because he's part of the moral majority. So, I don't know. That
just goes down to leading a different life for other people.
Well, but let's be clear. There are still laws on the books in states in this country where you still can be fired from your job. They still give the power. You can now marry, thanks to the Supreme Court ruling, but you can still lose your job. Oh, and I've seen the news articles on it. Oh, congratulations on your marriage. You're fired now. Goodbye. So we can't have that type of situation here. So, it's not like we've come to the promised land already. There is still a lot of work to be done.
Just 3 days after the September 11th terror attacks, which left 2,996 people dead and brought down the World Trade Center, Jerry Falwell stated during a televised appearance that the blame for 9/11 rested on the pagans and the abortionists, the feminists, the gays and the lesbians, who were actively trying to make an alternative lifestyle. All of them who have tried to secularize America. Falwell continued, "I point the finger in their face and say, you helped this happen." ABC News, October 14th, 2001. Falwell and the moral majority's hardline stance against the LGBT community emboldened their political base. Nowhere was that more evident than the 1985 Houston mayoral election. On October 24, 1985, Republican mayoral candidate and former mayor of Houston, Louis Welch, who was running a campaign against the progressive incumbent mayor, Kathy Whitmire, stared into the Channel 13 news camera and said that one way to control AIDS would be to shoot the queers. The interview was supposed to be focused on Mr. Welch's 4-point plan to fight the AIDS pandemic in Houston. As the interview was queuing up, Mr. Welch, having discussed his points informally with the reporter, made that gaffe. The newscast was live and the cameras were rolling. The day after Mr. Welch's on-air blunder, his campaign raised $70,000, which was among its biggest days of campaign fundraising. Mr. Welch's name was atop the ticket for a Houston City Council's campaign promoted as the Straight Slate. The 1985 Houston election cycle became an anti-gay referendum, this in the nation's fourth largest city. Institutional homophobia wasn't just prominent in Houston, it spread nationwide. In California, in 1986, a congressman named William Dannemeyer became involved with the government's response to the AIDS crisis. Among his contributions were the proposal of legislation that would prohibit by law those found positive with AIDS from entering into sexual contact, by further proposing that any who did be placed in enforced isolation for 5 years. In 1986, the average lifespan for those in the final stages of AIDS was just 3 years. The idea was pretty clear. burn out the disease away from the primary population, which sounds a lot like a concentration or internment camp. The congressman wasn't alone in expressing this opinion. Time magazine ran an article that appeared in the September 2, 1985 edition, stating that the moral majority repeatedly used the gay rights issue in its direct mail fundraising campaigns. At that time, Falwell was asking his troops to demand a federal task force to consider quarantine or imprisonment for homosexuals who continue sexual activity after they are diagnosed as having AIDS. The former Surgeon General of the United States, C. Everett Koop, offered this regarding the AIDS crisis in his memoirs. Some California congressmen had come under the sway of a group who despised not only homosexual behavior, but also homosexuals. They perpetuated a number of myths about AIDS transmission and called for unnecessary quarantine and testing. California Congressman William Dennemeyer, who had apparently bought into those myths, became increasingly strident about AIDS. C. Everett Koop continued by recalling a phone call that he received while at home one night from the congressman. "Why don't you get on the mandatory testing of the entire country?" asked the congressman. Dr. Koop responding, "I've told you that it's not within my power as a Surgeon General, and even if it was, I would not do it. But suppose for the sake of argument I could, and I did. Suppose I call you next week and said I know who every seropositive person was in the United States. What would you do?" After a long pause, Congressman Dennemeyer, as I recall, replied, "Wipe them off the face of the earth." In 1989, the Department of Health and Human Services released a 4-volume report on teen suicide, concluding that suicide among young people confused over their sexual orientation was a leading cause of death in teenagers throughout the United States. It concluded that young gays and lesbians are 6 times more likely to attempt suicide than their heterosexual peers. As many as 23% of all gay and lesbian adolescents were found to have attempted suicide throughout the study. In the study, gay and lesbian youth had been projected to comprise 30% of the suicides completed annually. The study further stated that if a gay or lesbian adolescent attempts suicide and initially fails, there is a far greater probability that they will attempt suicide again. Rather than acting on this information and calling for further research in the area, Health Secretary Dr. Sullivan joined with Congressman William Dennemeyer in demanding that this information be suppressed because it was against traditional family values. Because of Dr. Sullivan's stands, no recommendations for further research were made, and the report did not surface to the public's attention until years later.
To what extent do you think the support for the moral majority for Falwell comes from those who particularly are concerned with his attack and agree with his attack upon homosexuals?
It's very difficult to know. I know that within the churches generally, there's a great deal of ferment now. Some churches have moved as far as the Episcopalian Church. Bishop Moore in New York has actually ordained 2 lesbian women into the church. And in their recent convocation, which I think was about 2 months ago, at least as the Times wrote it up, there was thunderous applause when one minister, they've been studying this matter for 3 or 4 years, one minister said, Jesus Christ never said a word about homosexuality, for or against, and yet he spoke in detail about marriage and divorce.
Among the first openly lesbian candidates ordained in the Episcopal priesthood was the Reverend Carter Hayward. Reverend Hayward shared the following statement in her book, Touching Our Strength, in response to those like Falwell who would condemn and marginalize LGBT persons. "Whenever we speak the truths of our lives in situations in which our truths are unwelcome, we are like intense light, difficult for others to bear."
When we've talked in the past, I gather you've indicated that there is a body of scholarship that takes serious issue with Falwell's use of Scripture to condemn homosexuality.
Very much, yeah.
Is it a widespread movement in the church that interprets Scripture other than the way he does?
Well, I would say, I mean, if you look at biblical scholars, which are themselves a very special group within the church, biblical scholarship itself has been heading in one very clear direction of recent years. And that is they are retranslating some of the original texts, whether in Aramaic or Hebrew or Syrian, And they've discovered that a lot of the key passages that the Reverend Falwell cites, for example, Leviticus, Romans, Corinthians, these passages have, through time and the accretion of centuries, been weighted down with ever more accumulating misinterpretations. To give you just one example of the recent scholarship, John Boswell's book, which has caused a great stir and been received with great acclaim, he has gone back to the original texts, and he has discovered that in no case in the Bible is there any reference. Of course, there wouldn't be a reference to homosexual or homosexuality, but there is not even an equivalent word in the Bible. He's even discovered that until the 13th century, the Christian church itself was remarkably tolerant. Tolerant may be too benign a word. They were, in some cases, openly celebratory of gay life. There were gay saints. There were gay marriages openly performed.
John Boswell's research was definitely unwelcomed by the religious right, as its light was certainly difficult for them to bear. It appeared that gays and lesbians finally had a voice of authority within the church and society who could speak decisively in their support. Boswell's research clearly lifted the veil on centuries of historical commentary and showed that the church's aversion to its LGBT members was a relatively recent event. John Boswell is just the person we need to speak to in order to clear up Jerry Falwell's many objections. John Eastburn Boswell, the Yale University historian who upended medieval scholarship by finding not only that homosexuality was tolerated in the Middle Ages, but that same-sex unions were celebrated liturgically, died yesterday, December 24, 1994, in the Yale Infirmary. He was 47 and lived in New Haven. The cause was complications from AIDS, a friend Jerry Hart said. Dr. Boswell was born in Boston. He attended the College of William and Mary and Harvard University, from which he received his master's degree and doctorate. Among the 17 languages he read or spoke, Dr. Boswell counted Church Slavonic, Old Icelandic, and some classical Armenian, Syrian, and Persian. He joined the Yale faculty in 1975 as an assistant professor, was appointed to full professor in 1982, and named the A. Whitney Griswold Professor of History in 1990. When he began a 2-year term as the chairman of the history department. In 1987, Dr. Boswell helped organize the Lesbian and Gay Studies Center at Yale, which is now the research fund for lesbian and gay studies. In 1992, the Center for Disease Control reported that 1 million persons living in the U.S. were infected by AIDS. John Boswell was one of the 32,330 people who succumbed to AIDS-related illness in the United States in 1994. AIDS killed 324,029 men and women in the USA between 1987 and 1998. As we were unable to speak with John Boswell, I thought it would be good to speak to a friend who certainly knows of Boswell's work and how they've affected the LGBT communities and influenced churches and denominations. A friend who began as a Catholic Jesuit before becoming ordained an Anglican priest. A man who was marrying same-sex couples on the steps of his state capitol long before the Supreme Court gave its permission.
So what thoughts come to mind when I say the name John Boswell?
I think the first thing that comes to mind is someone who invited people back from the dark. And I think for so many gay and lesbian, bisexual, transgender people, we spent so much of our life in the church in the dark. And in so many ways, he really was a flashlight for those of us who are gay and lesbian, transgender, in that he invited us back to the community of believers.
How important was his work in terms of overall LGBT acceptance?
It was vast. I mean, for so many of us that really remember back to a time when we were oppressed, he was that strange, unique voice that came from the church that said, "Come home, welcome back." And I want to say this because he didn't do it just out of a social consciousness. He did it based in theology. And he used a theology that exceeded the times that we currently live in. So the impact was very large on people trying to really align themselves with faith.
You mentioned faith traditions welcoming people back, and I know from my own experience and from several friends, over the years, many of them felt alienated by the church and by religious establishments. For those that have shied away from reconnecting to their spiritual sides, what message do you have for them today, Rusty?
I think the most critical message, I'm sorry. Because I think so much of the church has not said that. And that is something that has to be said. People of faith, churches, synagogues, places of worship got it wrong. And I think today it's not that people have to come back or they have to return to the pews, but they need to hear that God was never out of love with them. And it was we as human beings who goofed it up. And when I say I am sorry, I say as a person of faith who believes there is not a God of judgment and hate. And I think we have now aligned ourselves with how God feels about us. Lavish welcome, lavish love.
On June 17, 2008, the California Supreme Court decided to legalize same-sex marriage. This right allowed Reverend Victor Anderson to construct a wedding chapel in the Castro.
I think it's a great civil rights moment in California history.
Unfortunately, Reverend Anderson's services may come to an end on Election Day. Proposition 8 eliminates rights of same-sex couples to marry.
I think Proposition 8 is wrong and unfair and a little bit evil because of how the people backing it are making their argument. Proposition 8 will remove the right of same-sex couples to marry, and all it deals with is the right of same-sex couples to marry. But the people backing Proposition 8 are turning it into a battle over education and church rights, which it is not about. So it's very frustrating that the public discussion is about a lot of issues completely unrelated to whether or not men can marry men and women can marry women.
No one ate! No one ate! No one ate! No one ate protesters chanted the night away outside of City Hall. This couple even decided to tie the knot before the election results came in.
We really wanted to make a statement about how wrong it is to deny basic rights to people, and so we thought getting married today would be a good statement around that.
Whether or not Proposition 8 passes, couples such as this are a strong indicator that the battle for equality will still persevere.
It may surprise some of you to learn that the normally liberal-leaning state of California once approved same-sex marriage for 6 months, during which some 18,000 couples were married, only to reverse it in a voter-backed repeal of LGBT rights.
Finally tonight, as promised, a special comment on the passage last week of Proposition 8 in California, which rescinded the right of same-sex couples to marry and tilted the balance on this issue from coast to coast. Some parameters as preface. This isn't about yelling, and this isn't about politics, and this isn't really just about Prop 8. And I don't have a personal investment in this. I'm not gay. I had to strain to think of one member of even my very extended family who is. I have no personal stories of close friends or colleagues fighting prejudice that still pervades their lives. And yet, to me, this vote is horrible. Horrible. Because this isn't about yelling, and this isn't about politics. This is about the human heart. And if that sounds corny, so be it. If you voted for this proposition or you support those who did or the sentiment they expressed, I have some questions because truly, I do not understand. Why does this matter to you? What is it to you? In a time of impermanence and fly-by-night relationships, these people over here want the same chance at permanence and happiness that is your option. They don't want to deny you yours. They don't want to take anything away from you. They want what you want, a chance to be a little less alone in the world. Only now you are saying to them, no, you can't have it on these terms. Maybe something similar if they behave, if they don't cause too much trouble. You'll even give them all the same legal rights, even as you are taking away the legal right which they already had. A world around them still anchored in love and marriage, and you're saying, no, you can't marry. What if somebody passed a law that said you couldn't marry? And uncountable in our history are the number of men and women forced by society into marrying the opposite sex in sham marriages, or marriages of convenience, or just marriages of not knowing. Centuries of men and women who have lived their lives in shame and unhappiness, and who have, through a lie to themselves or others, broken countless other lives of spouses and children, all because we said a man could not marry another man, or a woman could not marry another woman. The sanctity of marriage. How many marriages like that have there been? And how on earth do they increase the sanctity of marriage rather than render that term meaningless? What is this to you? Nobody is asking you to embrace their expression of love. But don't you as human beings have to embrace that love? The world is barren enough. It is stacked against love and against hope and against those very few and precious emotions that enable us, all of us, to go forward. Your marriage only stands a 50-50 chance of lasting, no matter how much you feel and how hard you work. And here are people overjoyed at the prospect of just that chance and that work just for the hope of having that feeling. With so much hate in the world, with so much meaningless division, and people pitted against each other for no good reason, this is what your religion tells you to do? With your experience of life and this world and all its sadnesses, this is what your conscience tells you to do? With your knowledge that life, with endless vigor, seems to tilt the playing field in which we all live in favor of unhappiness and hate, this is what your heart tells you to do? You want to sanctify marriage? You want to honor your God and the universal love you believe he represents? Then spread happiness. This tiny, symbolic, semantical grain of happiness. Share it with all those who seek it. Quote me anything from your religious leader or book of choice telling you to stand against this. And then tell me how you can believe both that statement and another statement, and another one which reads only, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. You are asked now by your country, perhaps by your creator, to stand on one side or another. You are asked now to stand not on a question of politics, not on a question of religion, not on a question of gay or straight. You are asked now to stand on a question of love. All you need to do is stand and let the tiny ember of love meet its own fate. You don't have to help it. You don't have to applaud it. You don't have to fight for it. Just don't put it out. Just don't extinguish it. Because while it may at first look like that love is between two people you don't know and you don't understand and maybe you don't even want to know, that love is in fact the ember of your love for your fellow person. Just because this is the only world we have and the other guy counts too. This is the second time I have found myself in 10 days concluding by turning to, of all things, the closing plea for mercy by Clarence Darrow in a murder trial. But what he said fits what is really at the heart of all of this. He said, I was reading last night of the aspiration of the old Persian poet Omar Khayyam. This is what he told the judge. It appealed to me as the highest that I can vision. I wish it was in my heart. I wish it was in the hearts of all. So I be written in the book of love. I do not care about that book above. Erase my name or write it as you will. So I be written in the book of love. Good night and good luck.
Between the three of us, we've got over 70 years of partnership with same-sex partners, better record than most marriages that I know of, frankly. I'm not going to change my decision about getting married. I don't feel I need the approval of the state. What about you, Daniel?
I absolutely would get married, and for a few different reasons. One is because I recently had a friend who died at 46 years old, died of a massive heart attack while vacationing in France. And his partner had no access to his body, no access to the remains, no ability to show to them that he was the person in his life for 18 years. There are things that come with marriage, and there are rights and responsibilities, and we're not getting any younger. And so I want to make sure that, if my bad gene pool finally kicks in and takes me from here, that my partner is protected by every mechanism that I have the power to protect him.
A December 2008 article in Rolling Stone pointed out that it had been well documented by an internal memo from the LDS Church that the church should be part of a coalition, and that joining the Catholic Church in a joint effort to repeal LGBT rights would be ideal. The article continued by pointing out the irony of this action by a church built on a founder who had 33 wives, joined by the Archbishop of San Francisco, who had excused child molestation at the hands of priests for years. Frank Schubert is quoted as saying that their core people of faith would organize through churches, and that their 100,000 volunteers would knock on 70% of the household doors throughout the state. In time, and through the 5-4 vote of the U.S. Supreme Court, marriage equality became the law of the land, and rights previously revoked in the state of California were returned to its LGBT citizens.
Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us. Same-sex marriage equality becomes the law of the land after a historic Supreme Court ruling.
The 5-4 decision grants same-sex couples the right to marry nationwide. In Minnesota, marriage equality became the law 2 years ago, but that didn't minimize the impact of the High Court's decision.
It's a historic day in Montgomery County, as you can tell from the supporters behind me, as the first same-sex marriages took place today here at the courthouse.
Because we're going to the courthouse and we're gonna get married.
The first same-sex couple to get married at the Montgomery County Courthouse has been together for over 13 years.
So the Chief Justice begins by saying Justice Kennedy has the opinion for the court in Obergefell versus Hodges. You didn't know really what that meant yet. Kind of everyone knew Justice Kennedy, who's a swing vote of the 9 justices, would have the opinion, but we didn't know what he'd say. And for the first 2 minutes, it was kind of dry, you know, marriage is this, there's a tradition of marriage, and it has been for centuries, one man and one woman. Pause. But it does not stop there. And that's when you knew. And you could see people crying in the courtroom.
So, what effect has the passing of marriage equality had on the lives of those who you've ministered to, as well as to the broader community?
Right. Marriage equality has changed how we define our relationships. For so many of us, we lived relationships, again, in the shadows of our community. Marriage equality didn't say we all had to get married, but it said we all could. And so it really was a course change. And I want to say in that dynamic, which was probably very critical, is for people of faith and faith leaders to welcome us back in places of sanctuary and say, we will confirm the reality of the people you love. It was a game changer. And the other part of this, just politically, I think it changed who we are as being invisible to being visible.
Has being cast in the role of a gay person living in the 80s and the 90s in Treading Yesterday changed your outlook at all, and how?
It gives me something to draw on. The topics that are relevant in this series about how things have stayed the same, but how things have changed also for the good. So that, I just have a lot, obviously being the oldest person in the cast, I have a lot more wealth of experience to draw
on. I think what's so cool about it is, like I was saying earlier, I'm like, it's such a different time. It's such a strange concept for me to grasp. So, I mean, to be able to play a character who saw it and lived it, I think it's kind of like, it's like a blessing, to be able to kind of experience what our community went through,
Because I think, especially when you grow up in a time that's at least more progressive than the 80s, it's easy to forget what the struggles were because, you don't really have... This is the best firsthand experience you're going to get, being able to step back into that time and just hear the language, hear the just the music and everything that was going on at that time. And like both of these guys kind of said, it's a way of seeing what was going on then, what's going on now, the parallels, and also just not to forget the hard work that was done back then and not forget that it needs to still be happening, because the thing is that, I mean, we keep talking about all the states that are still have these laws and still have the Bible Belt and the conservative and they're still coming for those rights. It's not like they're like, oh, we're defeated, we're done. Like, oh, that you guys won that. And so it's a good way of looking that it was such a struggle then, and that we need to remember that it's still a struggle now, and we need to keep moving forward instead of back.
Thank you all from the bottom of my heart.
Y les quiero decir gracias a todos de mi corazón
for all your prayers and all your support.
por todas sus oraciones y su apoyo.
I never thought that this would ever happen at City Hall.
Porque yo nunca pensé que esto iba a ocurrir en City Hall.
I never thought I would see the day that men and men would be married.
Y yo nunca pensé que íbamos a vivir los días donde hombre y hombre se iban a casar.
Or where people were allowed to go into the same bathroom as my daughter.
Y que hay hombres que pueden entrar al mismo baño que mi hija.
This world is changing.
Este mundo está cambiando.
And it's time for us.
Y es tiempo que nosotros
take the leadership.
Que tomemos ese liderazgo.
And change it back to the way it should be.
Y que lo cambiemos como antes.
Thank God for you all for being here.
As the sun set on June 26, 2015, the lives of LGBT Americans got a little brighter. The benefits of years of hard work and struggle culminated in the passing of marriage equality. Things were good for LGBT Americans on that day. As is often the case when things go well in one place, a counterbalance occurs in another, which is exactly what happened once marriage equality was the law of the land in the United States. The peddlers of misinformation and anti-LGBT hate had been planning for a decade for the day when they knew they would no longer be relevant in the US and find themselves without a platform and an audience. They'd lost the culture wars, or so it seemed. Not willing to fully concede following the Supreme Court ruling, these purveyors of hate did what most drug cartels do when one territory becomes too difficult to operate in. They simply opened other markets outside of the United States in which to export their hate. At the beginning of this film, we mentioned Trading Yesterday, the series that we've been developing for television. On the night of our world premiere, Dances with Films, all the world seemed right. We'd come so far as a people. Marriage equality was now a reality. The atmosphere of acceptance seemed to be all around us as our LGBT-centric pilot attracted a sold-out house for its world premiere at the Chinese Theater in Hollywood. Our cast and production team was surrounded by friends and family, and life was great. In our moment of celebration, we should have been mindful of just how quickly things can change. Change came just 24 hours later.
What's going on at Pulse nightclub?
I don't know. We're hearing gunshots like crazy.
Okay, hold on the line for Orlando Police Department. Try to get yourself somewhere safe. Don't hang up the phone.
Can you talk to me and give me anything? Yes, we're close to the shooting. A mass murder. We are on the way. We are on scene. Can you tell me what the shooter looks like? Can you tell me where the shooter is? We know that... Hello?
Whether the anti-LGBT messaging that you have accepted is this, or this, or even this, it all adds up and makes those who support it or represent it morally complicit in this. Stop and think. Stop and think. Stop and think. Mary Griffith has championed the inclusivity of LGBT persons as a member of PFLAG, Parents and Friends of Lesbians and Gays. Mary and her family lost their youngest son, Bobby, to suicide because of the narrow views that they, society, and their church once held and expressed about homosexuals. Unable to measure up to what society thought he should be, Bobby leapt to his death from a highway overpass into the path of an 18-wheel semi-truck, which ended his life. Mary Griffith offers this message to all of us. Because of my own lack of knowledge, I became dependent upon the people in the clergy. When the clergy condemns a homosexual person to hell and eternal damnation, we, the congregation, echo, Amen. I deeply regret my lack of knowledge concerning gay and lesbian people. Had I allowed myself to investigate what I now see as bigotry and dehumanizing slander against our fellow human beings, I would not be looking back with regret or having relinquished my ability to think and reason with other people. People I trust for truth and guidance in my life, and in the life of our gay son. God did not heal or cure Bobby as he, our family, and clergy believed he should. It is obvious to us now why he did not. God has never been encumbered by his child's genetically determined sexual orientation. God is pleased that Bobby has a kind and loving heart. In God's eyes, kindness and love are what life is about. I did not know that each time I echoed amen to the eternal damnation, referring to Bobby as sick, perverted, and a danger to our children, that his spirit was broken until he could no longer rise above the injustice of it all. Bobby ended his life at 20. Bobby's death was a direct result of his parents' ignorance and fear of the word gay. There are children like Bobby sitting in our congregations, unknown to you. They will be listening to your amens as they silently cry out to God in their hearts. Their cries go unnoticed, for they cannot be heard above your amens. Your fear and ignorance of the word gay will soon silence their cries. Before you echo amen in your home or place of worship, think and remember. A child is listening. A child is listening. Stop and think. We have the power to evoke change, now more than ever. We have the power to demand change by supporting those whose works embody this change. We have the power to evoke this change throughout our land and into the world. History is on the side of change. Take to the streets. Ensure that your voices are heard. Those who came before us sacrificed to make today better than yesterday, and we should too.